A group of death row prisoners seeks pardon by venturing to the mythical island in search of the elixir of immortality. However, even though these prisoners possess extraordinary skills, on an island that resembles hell, survival is their only option. On an execution platform during the Edo period, a white-haired young man finds no reason to keep living. Thus, a blade is placed against his neck. He allows the blade to fall upon his throat. Yet, what breaks in two is not his body, but the hardened samurai blade. The boy's eyes were filled with sorrow. He couldn't understand why he just couldn't die. To help the boy fulfill his wish, the officials tied him to a burning stake, but as the flames engulfed him completely, all that turned to ashes were his clothes. Even the cruelest punishment of being trampled by bulls seemed to punish the exhausted bulls more than him. The officials gnashed their teeth in frustration. Why couldn't they just send him to the afterlife? At that moment, the recorder standing nearby raised a question. The boy kept saying he wished for death. But why did he seem more like he was resisting? These words cast a shadow over the boy's face, as if they had struck a hidden truth within him. Yet, he still chose to tell the truth. The boy's name was Gabimaru. He was a ninja from Iwagakure village. Shortly after his birth, his parents were killed by the village chief. After that, he was raised as nothing more than a tool. His daily task was to carry out the chief's orders to kill. Over time, he became the strongest ninja in Iwagakure. As a result, the chief arranged for his daughter to marry him. But unlike her ruthless father, his daughter was pure and kind-hearted. From then on, Gabimaru's life began to change. Take off your sandals before coming inside. Let's put our hands together and pray to the gods once a day. Let's say words of gratitude before every meal. His wife shone upon him like a gentle light. But for Gabimaru, who was drowning in darkness, it felt unsettling. He asked the chief for permission to leave the village and abandon his old ways. He hoped for the chief's understanding. Yet, during his final mission assigned by the chief, he was betrayed by his comrades and captured by the authorities. Watching his comrades sneering in the shadows, Gabimaru realized it was all a trap set by the chief. Freedom had never been an option for him. Rather than being hunted forever, he chose to become a death row prisoner. And facing execution to attain true liberation didn't seem like a bad choice. The recorder took notes of the young man's words. However, the expression on their face was unreadable. If what Gabimaru said was true, then why did he resist arrest and kill 20 people? This question also troubled Gabimaru as he returned to his cell. Did he truly not want to die? He had no reason to keep living. He resolved to face death the next day. However, the next day, when the boiling oil execution arrived, it was not him who died. Gabimaru walked out of the 370 degrees Celsius boiling oil completely unscathed. He returned like a messenger from hell. Meanwhile, an official nearby was instantly set ablaze just from accidentally touching a drop of the oil. At that moment, the recorder, who had witnessed everything, slowly closed her book. She told the officials that everything was ready. It seemed that things were starting to change. Gabimaru was taken to a secret chamber. When the door opened, he saw the recorder inside. But this time, she held a samurai sword. The recorder's name was Sagiri. She was an executioner from Edo. Her family had been executioners for generations. With a single strike, she could behead a person. Gabimaru knew she wasn't boasting. In just an instant, he could feel death approaching. His survival instinct made him break free from his restraints. But before he realized it, Sagiri was already behind him. Gabimaru had to use his true skills to escape. Yet, at some point, blood had already started dripping from his neck. If he hadn't dodged in time, he would have been dead. Sagiri stripped away Gabimaru's final facade. When the true threat of death arrived, nothing was more honest than the body. Having witnessed many final moments, Sagiri had already seen through Gabimaru's heart. You cling to life because you love your wife. Isn't her existence the meaning of your life? At that moment, Gabimaru realized the truth. He didn't choose to leave his past behind because he couldn't adapt to his wife. It was because he wanted to live a normal life with her. He didn't want to return home with blood on his hands. Nor did he want his gentle wife to have to force a strong smile. Gabimaru couldn't face his own heart. He grabbed his weapon and attacked Sagiri. Sagiri kept cutting through his self-deception. The reason he couldn't die from execution was because his heart still longed for his wife. But now, how could Gabimaru face all of this? He was nothing more than an empty machine. After all, in Iwagakure, men were just killing machines. Women were merely tools for reproduction. The village chief even killed Gabimaru's parents and disfigured his own daughter, all to prevent them from pursuing their own lives. But the heart does not die so easily. However, what? Your face is so red. How could someone like that be empty? Whenever he recalled his wife's gentle words, he could only keep numbing himself, telling himself he was empty. Because reality could never be changed. But at that moment, Sagiri took out a scroll. It was an official pardon issued by the Shogunate. As long as Gabimaru obtained it, he could live as a free man. He could live a normal life with his wife. But the pardon wouldn't come for free. Gabimaru had to travel to the other shore. Since ancient times, people have called it the land of the immortals. A place free of suffering. It was said that flowers danced there, surrounded by songs. Rumor had it that the land held an elixir of immortality. Nobles risked their lives to seek it. Yet ship after ship was sent, and none ever returned. All that came back were boats filled with blooming corpses. This miraculous sight convinced the shogun that the elixir truly existed. He decided to gather talented death row inmates to investigate. Whoever brought back the elixir would be granted full pardon. Sagiri's mission was to find suitable candidates. And the most important trait of a capable person was their determination to survive. Sagiri told Gabimaru, after his arrest, his wife shut everyone out. She firmly believed that her husband would return safely. If he wanted to go home and reunite with her, this was his only chance. Gabimaru recalled his wife's gentle smile. Tears welled up in his eyes uncontrollably. At that moment, he made his decision. You want to see some ninjutsu, right? If that's what you want, then witness my ninjutsu, Flame Monk. To make better use of human resources, the shogun decided to gather death row convicts. Whoever could retrieve the elixir of immortality would be granted full pardon. Gabimaru the Hollow was among them. Sagiri watched him, now in a relaxed state, as if he had shed his former self. But when Sagiri reflected his image on her blade, she realized that no matter how harmless he seemed on the surface, his darkness was unfathomable. Just then, a small cart was pushed onto the platform. A soldier yanked off the white cloth, revealing a man whose body was covered in blooming flowers. Even though he was clearly dead, his mouth kept letting out eerie giggles. Convicts in the audience erupted into chaos. They would rather be executed than end up like that monstrosity. Some even shouted that they would leave immediately. But they were swiftly executed on the spot. At that moment, the official informed them, each convict sent to the island would be accompanied by a watcher. If they tried to abandon the mission or act suspiciously, they would be executed on the spot. Suddenly, the shogun came up with an idea. He ordered his men to announce, since ship space is limited, both convicts and their watchers count toward capacity, which means we must reduce the numbers. While some were still confused, others immediately understood. What are you doing? Look. He didn't say anything, which means I'm right. He wants us to kill each other. The guards didn't deny it, instead reminding the convicts not to break their restraints. And in an instant, a bloodbath erupted. Every convict was now fighting for their survival. Meanwhile, the shogun watched with amusement. He even ordered his men to provide live commentary. After all, the ones with the special red markings were the true highlights. Like him, a young leader of a bandit gang, he had established a bandit village deep within the Iyo Mountains. That woman was the criminal behind last year's rebellion at Sagiha Castle. A kunoichi who conquered every vassal within the castle. A swordsman known as Kenryu, or the unrivaled of 8 provinces. And a giant rumored to devour bears, said to be impervious to any weapon. However, the biggest highlight was still this living legend. Yet when the official pointed at him, Gabimaru remained motionless. He simply watched in silence. But at that moment, some death row convicts set their sights on Sagiri. They assumed a woman would be an easy target. But Sagiri was no ordinary woman. Born into a family of executioners who lived by the blade, she had been surrounded by death since childhood. And in an instant, she swiftly eliminated several convicts. Yet fear still crept in silently. Sagiri had known her duty since childhood. Even when bullied for her family name, she pretended to be strong. But deep down, she could never deny her fear. Why do you think killing is acceptable? Can't you think of another way? Gabimaru couldn't understand a shogun's actions. Not all death row convicts were bloodthirsty killers. If given a choice, he wouldn't kill. But the officials ignored him. Instead, they encouraged the convicts. Kill Gabimaru, and you'll secure your spot on the ship. In an instant, he became their prime target. Gabimaru had no desire for meaningless slaughter. But he wouldn't let himself be killed either. In just a few moves, he took down a crowd. Then, he charged out of the arena. Seeing such ruthless efficiency, even the once amused shogun felt fear. Sagiri watched as Gabimaru's silhouette stood against the blood-stained sunset. And at that moment, she understood her heart. What I need is not power that fears killing, but the resolve to bear that fear. After the brutal massacre, only a handful of survivors remained. Most were those with red markings. The next day, under the watch of their overseers, they boarded the ship to the fabled land of the immortals. Even someone as strong as Gabimaru, upon seeing the breathtaking beauty of the island, felt a sense of unease. Just moments ago, Gabimaru and Sagiri successfully arrived on the island. While the death row convicts who found the elixir would be granted full pardon, Sagiri remained skeptical of the elixir's existence. Gabimaru, on the other hand, had no doubts. Because his village chief seemed to be an immortal himself. The only question was whether the elixir was truly on this island. As Sagiri admired the island's vibrant flowers, she sighed in wonder. But Gabimaru warned her to stay alert. Speaking casually, he freed himself from his restraints. This action greatly displeased Sagiri, who was in charge of overseeing him. Gabimaru didn't understand how was he supposed to complete the mission like that. Besides, the shogunate had only provided 3 days' worth of food and water. They had little information to go on. The priority should be completing the mission as soon as possible. But Sagiri clearly thought differently. She was his overseer, not his ally. Whether Gabimaru received a pardon or not was none of her concern. Her duty was simple: if he strayed from the path, she would behead him. Gabimaru sighed at her stubbornness and reluctantly agreed to wear the rope. But at that moment, a heavy iron ball came flying. It struck Gabimaru and sent him flying several meters. The attacker was another death row convict traveling with them. But despite the weapon master's blatant aggression, the overseers remained silent. Luckily, Gabimaru was only startled and unharmed. But what concerned him more was, why was this weapon master, also a death row convict, allowed to move freely? The overseer named Tamaya was also surprised. That Sagiri was so rigid in her approach. These death row inmates were no ordinary criminals. Each of them had hidden agendas. They would do anything to survive. Many secretly plotted to kill one another. Some even targeted their own overseers. But misjudging the situation could also mean instant death. If Sagiri kept that naive mindset, she might end up buried on this island herself. But while they were talking, the weapon master grew impatient. He was the kind who thrived on killing. He eliminated all competition. Finding the elixir would just be a matter of time. And his first target was Gabimaru. Hearing this, Gabimaru had no intention of holding back. Just as he was about to unleash his full power, Sagiri still stubbornly held onto her principles. Fine, I've tied it. The weapon master, seeing Gabimaru's high durability, wasn't angry but instead delighted. To him, this was the perfect opportunity to test his weapons. But Gabimaru had no time to play along. With a single motion, he effortlessly lifted him. As the scattered weapons rained down, Gabimaru's movements were swift and precise. Without breaking a sweat, Gabimaru sent his opponent to the afterlife. Tamaya, seeing his assigned convict dead, calmly prepared to return home. But before leaving, he shared some crucial information. The shogunate had already sent men to recruit from Iwagakure. Time was running out for Gabimaru. Moreover, the reason the Yamada Asaimen were assigned to this mission was because the next leader of the shogunate's military would be chosen from among them. He advised Sagiri to be careful. But as soon as Tamaya left, Sagiri was suddenly attacked. Gabimaru initially intended for her to die without suffering, so she wouldn't have to experience pain. But upon hearing that Iwagakure was approaching, Gabimaru lost all patience for games with Sagiri. He needed to finish the mission immediately. The most efficient way was to eliminate the rigid overseer in front of him. Yet strangely, despite their clashing swords, both of them seemed to be holding back. Gabimaru couldn't understand his hesitation. Not wanting to kill is natural, isn't it? But, I'm supposed to be the hollow Gabimaru. If you feel something, follow it. You are no longer who you once were. True courage is staying true to your feelings. Because of his wife, Gabimaru learned what love was. But at the same time, he also learned hatred. That man is not our target. He said he wanted revenge on me and my wife, so. Inside him resided both a demon and an angel. The two forces mirrored his village chief and his wife. His wife's existence made it impossible for him to strike the killing blow. Yet his chief's teachings continued to erode his mind. In the end, the demon won out. Sagiri, pinned beneath the demon above her, knew that she might not survive. But just as Gabimaru was about to strike, his wife's image seemed to break the curse of his village chief. He hesitated, unable to move. Seeing the pain on Gabimaru's face, Sagiri finally realized, since the moment they met, this young man had always worn that same expression. He was always enduring something. At that moment, Sagiri finally understood he was not hollow. He simply had no choice in the environment he was raised in. At last, Sagiri let go of her prejudices. If Gabimaru truly felt remorse, even though their roles wouldn't change, she was willing to watch him start anew. You are not who you used to be. A white-haired boy suddenly spotted a fish walking upright in front of him. The fish was even holding prayer beads. On this bizarre island, sights like this seemed common. Gigantic creatures with arms growing from their eyes, distorted features, and eerie smiles roamed everywhere. Butterflies with human faces killed without warning. Gabimaru eyed the fish-like creature with the prayer beads. His instincts screamed that it was dangerous. After taking a hit, Gabimaru instinctively thought of fleeing. Avoiding battle when the enemy was unknown was a shinobi's golden rule. But just as he hesitated over whether to escape, the fishman's attack was already upon him. Even with Gabimaru's incredible defense, he was injured. But that wasn't the worst part. From all directions, grotesque monsters appeared. Gabimaru quickly decided to fight back. His instincts told him there was no time for hesitation. Survival could only be ensured through slaughter. Watching the carnage, Sagiri felt disoriented. This was no paradise, it was hell. But at that moment, a monster had crept up behind her. By the time she realized it, her feet had already been ensnared. Gabimaru sensed Sagiri's danger. He knew logically that he couldn't save her, but his body moved against that reasoning. By the time Gabimaru came to his senses, Sagiri was already in his arms. This also meant his back was completely exposed to the enemy. At that moment, three figures appeared. A female ninja, introducing herself as Yuzuriya, casually announced she wanted to team up with Gabimaru. Sagiri found the arrangement odd. This convict had two overseers. But Yuzuriya ignored her. She moved in close, attempting to seduce Gabimaru. But as a married man, Gabimaru had no intention of falling for it. Ouch. Ow, ow, what are you doing? Seduction won't work on me. I know kunoichi tricks all too well. Even after failing, Yuzuriya wasn't upset. She insisted that her invitation to team up was genuine. Sagiri then voiced her question. Why did this group have two overseers? It turned out the original convict under Genji's watch had been deceived by Yuzuriya's charms, and ended up dead under her skirt. Because of this, Genji, unwilling to let Yuzuriya roam unchecked, joined the group to monitor her. Meanwhile, a stocky man stood beside them. He was her original overseer. Understanding the situation, Yuzuriya once again extended her invitation. We can betray each other anytime. After all, even if we find the elixir, only one person can receive the pardon. But I mean Iceway can use each other.